the landscape has definitely changed in a way, and all thanks to COVID, because it has definitely changed the way we do things, right?
Exactly, especially for students out there. I have a friend who is currently taking her master's, and I told her every single time, every time I look at you, it makes me think twice about going back to school, simply because of how not only the students have to learn, but also the professors having to, curate their classes. Sometimes they do online, sometimes they require the students to come for physical classes. So it's actually a very, very interesting journey right now. Those of you guys who are in the education sector.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, do you like the traditional stuff of actually going to college, going to university to learn, or do you prefer having taught online? It's funny, because when COVID happened, students were like, man, I have to study at home. I don't know how to study at home because where I study is the same place where I sleep. And right now, when everything is resumed, going back to the endemic phase, when of course a face-to-face session will be resumed, and they'll be like, I don't know, Ma, I don't want to go back to college.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, like going to college is like going to work. You have to. I at least had to wake up 2 hours before, get on the ATM and get on the bus, go to uni, so on and so forth. So we're actually going to speak to your university, Chancellor. So that's going to be very, very exciting. You actually went to this university, you're an alumni. And how about you introduce them?
Okay, yes, let's get the ball rolling. The future of education after COVID, of course. Let's welcome Professor Patricia Davidson, Vice Chancellor of UOW Australia. Welcome to the show.
Thank
nice to have
you
you
so
here,
much.
Prof.
Great
and
to
also Datuk Seri Dr. Michael Yam, Chancellor of UOW Malaysia KDU.
Thank you.
Welcome to the show, Chancellor.
Thank you.
Super exciting. They was telling off camera how proud they are, having Brandon as their alumni. How does that feel, Brandon?
Scary.
You're grown up now, Brandon.
I hope so.
We're going through your student record.
Oh my gosh, please don't do so. But anyway, the first question is, how has COVID-19 impacted your global network? Let's start with Prof. Yeah.
Well, I think it's been devastating in many ways, just the suffering around the world. But as you mentioned, there's been some silver linings. There's been huge disruption for student mobility, but people have prevailed. Teachers have been innovative. Students have been collaborative. And in spite of major disruption, most students are continuing on time and on target. And we've learned a lot about ourselves, our flexibility, our ability to innovate, and we've also learned about the power of technology in promoting connectivity.
EdTech, yeah. When it comes to EdTech, is there any room for improvement in terms of connectivity, Chancellor?
Of course. It's a whole learning curve. When this pandemic hit towards the end of 2019 in other countries, and then finally came to our shores in 2020, where we had the first lockdown, 18 March. We didn't know how long this is going to last because nobody had a crystal ball. And as you all know, this has become very protracted. And I think when people realize that this is not going to be a short-term crisis, everyone sort of just ramp up.
Yeah.
That includes myself, an antique, right? I have to start to learn Zoom, MS Teams, Blue Jeans, all that sort of stuff, so that I could connect with the people, the stakeholders that I deal with. These are board of directors of public listed company, and we're carrying out board meetings, even AGM based on that.
Wow.
And that's just the sort of the hardware, right? The regulators, you think about the stock exchange, the security commission, the government, have to change the laws, right? So that you can adapt that resolutions carried out in the air, in cyberspace, is also recognized and accepted. So I think everyone sort of speeded up to just adapt. And I'm glad they did, because this thing lasted until
today.
Until
almost today.
Until today, it's impacted. Like I said, I'm looking at all my friends who are currently in university. Any of my younger friends who are currently in university. I'm actually quite I applaud them for, how fast they manage to adapt. I applaud the lecturers for being able to adapt as well. Like you said, for certain, actually, it's interesting that you mentioned that you guys were talking to your stakeholders, your BODs and whatnot, because when we think about the education system, the way I think about it, it's like, okay, the educator and the student. I don't think about the business end of it, right?
Yeah.
But we're actually gonna go back and talk about the lecturers, because throughout the pandemic, I saw so many videos of lecturers having to do online classes. I think the one memorable video I had was a lecturer, I think in the States. He felt so awkward because he's an old school lecturer. He's so used, he likes the interaction between him and the students. So what he did was instead, next to his laptop was a doll. So he actually spoke to the doll as if the doll was a student, so that it felt more interactive. And him as an educator as well, you don't get, you don't meet the silence of a Zoom class. So in the minds of educators nowadays, I'm actually curious: will the education system still be done in a way where it's half and half? Students are gonna, go for online classes, or are they gonna, gear towards a full physical class for the next 1 year even?
Yeah.
Well, I think around the world, people are trying to recalibrate. And I think what we've recognised is there's a huge variability in what students want. As you mentioned, some students are thinking, great, I can do this from my bedroom and it's good. And others really miss the connectivity. So I think we're trying to get to that sweet space, which is probably the blended learning model, where why should you travel for 2 hours to sit in a lecture hall for something that you can do at home? But really making sure that your time on campus is around connection and activities. And also I've had to learn a lot of different things. Just here watching your production today, I think like in teacher education, there's going to be a lot more about multimedia. How you don't actually have to talk at someone for an hour to get a message through. So I think there's going to be a lot of innovation in teaching and learning and aligning expectations. So I think that's where we're at.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love the word aligning expectation. Because at least, as a student, I come like, I'm cause at the end of the day, how I think about it is that each and every course has its needs, right? A mass comm student is different from an architecture student, it's different from a medical student. Because I think with those, anybody who's sitting for an architecture course or a medical course, they need to be able to do the practical. Like for me, when I was in media, I could still do my portfolio and still submit it online. It's still fine. I'm still able to do my presentation online. So it's actually very, very interesting to see how the education system is going to adapt. For you, Brandon, do you prefer, if you were going back to a student, right? I'm actually very curious. Would you want to stay inside a class or you're good with doing online?
I think I would want to go back to class.
Yeah, right?
Face to face is different in that sense because, like what Chancellor just mentioned, there is some sort of a connection with the students. And this is the area in which whereby I think most of them are still trying to breach the gap of actually connecting to their students, because it's actually very important. When you do it online, it's going to be a little bit more difficult because you got to email your lecturer and things like that and get a reply. But at the end of the day, Chancellor, here's a question. What is the depth of the impact globally in the education sector?
I think as Trish has mentioned, I think it's been tremendous in terms of negative impact. So I think if you look at the recent survey, globally, 4 out of 10 students think that will impact negatively their employment prospects.
Okay.
Malaysia was, I think, if I recall, about 36% of the students think the same way, that it will impact their future. But having said that, I think something like 70% of the students thinks they will still need a university education so that their job prospects would be good. So I guess what they're saying is, do you go to university or do you not go to university? And the simple answer is yes, you do, because 70% thinks optimistically that they'll get a job. This question wouldn't arise if not for the pandemic. If I come from the employment side of the equation, just to add some color to what Trish says, she's saying that I think they need to find a landing as to the blend, whether it's 70-30, remote, virtual and physical, or 60-40 or whatever it is. I think, as you rightly say, Zooey, it really depends on the courses that you do. I would hate to go to my cardiologist who has attended his 7 years course 80% of the time virtual.
Yeah.
Right?
How would you even do that?
Yeah,
You're
architecture.
operating the air.
Yeah, architecture the same thing.
Yeah.
But from the commercial perspective, I think maybe the point is missed here. We're not talking about just gaining of education and academic excellence, the IQ part. The EQ is equally, if not more important. Right? The fact that you can go to a water fountain and have a chat and come up with bright ideas, versus doing on Zoom. I think it's very, very different. I think the world will probably decide pretty quickly where, I mean, if I'm from the employment side, I would want to see a university that comes to my firm that does, say, engineering and construction management, say, I want to see that in his report that he's actually attended 80% of the classes physically.
Yeah.
However, if it's journalism, it's maybe the other way around.
Yeah.
I don't care, maybe 20-80.
Yeah.
So we need to probably put that and tick against the box that profession that the person intends to go into has got minimum attendance at classes. Think about those days, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tutorials and all that, right? Most of the preliminary session you can disappear, but tutorials you must be there.
You have to.
Mystery.
Oh my gosh.
You miss 3 classes and you're done.
Yeah.
I remember.
So you deep dive. Really, the education of those days is saying it is physical contact. It is knowing all your peer groups, the behaviors, the behavioral sciences you want to know, so that when you go into a job market, you're all prepared for all sorts of character.
Yeah.
That's
Actually, my best moments in I think adulthood is all university. Like you said, it's all about the connection you make in your university. That's I think, other than actually getting your papers, getting your education, getting that, getting the cert that say, I have my degree, I have my master's, I have my PhD, diploma, whatever you guys decide to take. But it's also the connection, because like you said, I haven't met some of my high school mates, my uni mates, after we graduated, and a couple years later, hey, we're all in the same industry, or we're all in the same line of work, or some sort of
networking.
Yeah, the
Very
networking,
important.
right?
Yeah.
I want to talk about the students, the 30%. Does that include the students who decided to drop out during the pandemic, or decide, look, possibly this is not for me, I don't want to waste my time, I don't want to waste my money, I'm probably just going to go ahead and, I perhaps have a family that I need to help to support. I'm going to drop out of university and I'm going to work. So does that 30% include the dropouts? Or is that just
I think, Zoe, you've brought up a really good point, is that the pandemic has really widened inequities in society. And say, even in Australia, which is a very wealthy country, we've just seen these huge widening gaps between the rich and the poor. And the same as now, your ability to access the internet, to afford the internet, is huge. So there's, say, for example, many areas in many countries where people don't have digital access. That's going to impact their ability to not just get education, but also healthcare services. So I think, and then what we're finding is that many people have the financial uncertainty has really impacted. But I think the other thing that has really emerged out of the pandemic is that, your life is long and your education can take numerous journeys. So for many of our students where it was hard and they dropped out, we're really trying to encourage them to come back to recognise that, it's okay if it was too hard, but come back and try again and we'll help you. Because we know that a university education is such a predictor of your security across your whole lifespan, and not just yours, your families. For women, if you're educated, your children are going to be educated. So it's just so important.
Right.
Yeah, Chancellor, there's a very good point there, Prof. But we'll get back to you shortly because we need to get both of your opinions. Let's talk about dropouts, the students who, unfortunately, like what Zooey just said, they had to fend for their family, they have to support their families because of the pandemic. The future is uncertain. money is at utmost importance here because they need to support their family. What kind of advice would you give them to these students who are dropouts, who still, hanging halfway? What would you tell them so that they can actually come back to university?
Actually, to those listeners out there, the word dropout seems
a bit
like
too harsh.
Stereotyping.
I would say I'm a dropout. I will say, but I have my reason.
I was a dropout.
Yeah, I have my reason.
We all drop out.
Yeah.
We all drop out sometimes. Yeah.
I didn't drop out. I'm halfway done. I'm halfway done.
Half-boiled egg lunch.
Yes, that's all I like to make.
Yeah. Picking from what you said, Zoe, education is a lifelong process. So this particular pandemic has been exceptional, unprecedented. That's the word they use. And I think the ecosystem around education, the universities such as UOW or our public universities, has to give this opportunity to say, yes, I understand that you have left education because of other pressing needs. And we know in Malaysia, quite a lot of families are living on marginal sort of survival. And if one of the breadwinner loses a job, you're gone, right? Think about our East Malaysian brothers and sisters. When they go back to where they live, there's no internet. You can't climb on the tree and try and get the signal, right?
Yeah.
So those are very good reasons. And do you discriminate them from coming back? The answer must be no. I think we must facilitate. In fact, some universities will say, if you have dropout during 2020 and 2021, please come back. I'm going to give you a great discount so that you have an opportunity. And it's more critical in the Malaysian context because unlike, say, Australia and UK, you can always go back, open university, there's mature student arrangement. When you drop out from a university here, it's like the end of the world.
Yeah.
The whole village will say, don't marry him or don't marry her because her prospects are gone. So I think the whole education environment needs to sort of transform itself to cope with this unprecedented event. And there may be more coming in the pipeline too.
Yeah. Exactly, Chancellor. Thank you, Chancellor. What about you, Prof? What would you say to them?
Well, it's interesting. Like, I went to the Australian National University my first year out of school. It didn't work out, and very quickly I am actually an alumna of the University of Wollongong, and it worked out that time. But one of the things that I tell all of our faculty, and I know they practice this, is kindness and generosity. Just don't be harsh to judge. And I think I'm only here where I am because teachers were kind to me and helped me find the way. So, I absolutely agree with the Chancellor. And anyone that's listening today, go back, try it. If you just might have not been the right course, the right time, or the right place. But, an education is just such a wonderful gift of life.
I love it. That's a perfect note to end our interview today. And I really want to talk a little bit more about, how the education system is going to move towards the endemic. But again, fortunately, we've run out of time. I didn't even realize that our producer was like, last question. I'm like, we're done. Okay, so thank you again.
I'm relieved because when she did her confession, I was going to confess how many universities I dropped off.
Hey,
But it's a way out.
Yeah, but again, lovely note to end on. And again, those of you guys who are, you're halfway there. Okay? You didn't drop out.
No.
You're halfway there.
Definitely not.
You're halfway there.
Yes, you're seeing two fine examples here.
Exactly. See?
And here.
And here. Yeah. So again, thank you so much for coming on the show. Come back next time. We'll talk about, perhaps whether or not we can go fully online.
Yeah.
And whether or not, your cardiology students can actually finally perhaps send a body to them and they can probably operate.
Can you actually imagine? I'll send you a treadmill. Just work on that first.
Oh, crazy.